Hey guys, Tisha here, and we are back for another movie review. I promise you I watch more than Tyler Perry, but blame it on HBO because I was watching one movie and the next thing I knew, this was on, and then I found myself taking notes. So, A Family That Prays Together. The film opens with a wedding being thrown at who we learn is Charlotte massive home. We meet Alice and Charlotte Cartwright, who we see early on are close friends. We find out that they became friends years ago when one of Charlotte's many husbands was a developer that tried to convince Alice to sell her business. Couldn't do it, sent his wife to do it, and they just became friends. So, the Cartwright family owns one of the largest construction firms in Georgia. Meanwhile, we have Alice, who is the owner of a diner. Now, you would think that these two people, one whom which happens to be black and the other which happens to be white, would not be in the same circle, but they are friends, and it seems to me like they're legitimate friends that love one another. Her daughters, Alice's daughters, are Pam, who's played by Taraji, and Andrea, who is played by Sanaa Lathan. And Pam is married to Ben, who is Tyler Perry. Tyler Perry, when he plays men, is always kind of interesting to me, but he did a decent job with this role. Anyway, so Charlotte's son, William, runs the company, and William eloped with his wife, who's named Jillian. So Charlotte is very happy to be able to preside over this big Southern wedding for Andrea because she was never able to do one for her son. Meanwhile, Andrea, on the other hand, I can immediately tell is a piece of work because we see her standing in a mirror complaining about her mother and how she doesn't look out for her and how she doesn't appreciate her while getting ready for this wedding in her hand-me-down dress that was her mother's. And in her words, the white woman, Charlotte, that paid for her black friend's wedding so that she could tell her friends how she helped out the poor colored children. Her words. That alone let me know that Andrea was going to get on my nerves. And she did, especially because in watching the film, it didn't appear as if Charlotte looked down on that family at all. It didn't even seem to me like she looked at the fact that they were not of the same ethnicity. Instead, the man that we're going to see Andrea, spoiler, end up cheating with is the one who actually looked down on her, but we'll get into it. So Andrea is marrying Chris, who we later find out is a construction worker. He's nervous, but Pam's husband is talking him off the ledge. I wrote Brian here. Is the man's name Brian or Ben? Oops. We don't see the wedding, but we do see how quickly Andrea, who just got married, seems to be taken with William. So William is speaking to them, and he offers to get Chris a construction job. After all, he is a Cartwright, as well as get Andrea a job because she is working on her finance degree, which she's going to have in 5 months. It seems like a nice gesture, but something about the way that he spoke had me keeping my eye on him. He says to call him directly and he'll take care of things. It's clear to me very early on that William likes to flex his power, and he's able to do so with people like Andrea, who seem to be enamored by status and prestige and power. That's what seems to matter to her. So it takes no time before Andrea, this newlywed bride, is impressed by William. Keep this in mind because there's something about the way that you see William put his hand on her shoulder that made me feel like he very early on seemed a bit too comfortable with her. Now, of course, they knew of each other because their moms were friends over the years, but it just seemed like it was a little too close for comfort. So It's 4 years later. Both Chris and Andrea work for William. Well, actually, the Cartwrights. Chris is on the Cartwright construction site, and Andrea is the company's financial wizard. So, her mother, Alice Diner, appears to be struggling in some ways. We don't know how badly it is, but even with that, you see her still looking out for people like Nick. Now, Nick, we don't find out a lot about, but they do give us little peeks into his character as the movie progresses. We see Nick come into the diner looking a little disheveled. We're told that he lost his job, that his wife passed, and that his kids were taken. Now, we do not know the timeline on this. We just know that it happens. He follows Pam to the back, who is the older daughter, and she gives him a bucket and a towel so that he can wash up, along with some fresh clothes that he can change into in a locker where you see various clothes hanging for him. So you can tell that this is something that they frequently do. He points out to Pam that her mother, Alice, is a saint. Okay. We, even after he's done eating and stuff, we see him telling Alice, we see Alice telling Nick that if he ever wants to come off the street, to let her know. That scene made me say, okay, Alice is different. Alice seems to be the caring type, because here she is looking out for someone who's visibly struggling, even saying, like, whenever you're ready, let me know. Andrea comes in to get her child from her sister because Pam picks up her son and watches him until she gets off work. They argue about how she did not pay Pam the $300 that she was supposed to give her. We hear her mom saying, y'all are always arguing. You've been arguing all your lives. Basically, Andrea feels like she's better than her sister and her mom just because she's managed to make something out of herself. And you could gather this from the argument, like where she's talking about, where they used to stay and those people and all those other things. But she was only able to become who she is because of the sacrifices that her mother made. Example, by paying for her college. So her education was paid for by her mom, but yet here she is and she's looking down on her mom. So Pam says, instead of helping me, why don't you help mama? We only made $217 this week. She writes her mother a check and hands it to her mom. And her mom says, keep your little money, girl. Which, when I first heard it, I'm like, keep your little money? Your daughter just said that you only made $217 this week. Even though you're saying some weeks are better than others, it doesn't take a genius to realize that $217 is not going to help keep a business afloat. But we find out later on about that. So she quickly writes a check for her mom for $5,000 and then says, can I go now? With no desire to continue the conversation. Meanwhile, we see William arrive at home to his wife, Jillian, who he embraces while she talks about their son and his acceptance to the Whitmore Academy, because you have to keep that look, that legacy, that level of education in their family. They embrace again. He presents her with a diamond necklace for her to wear to the opening of the new Cartwright Towers. We find out that he signed a $500 million international deal by himself. So he now feels like his mother will have to give the company to him, and she's excited for him, and he's so entitled because you did this one thing and you feel like now your mom has to give you the company. She's excited, but she's bothered by something as he puts that necklace around her neck and they embrace. You can tell that something about that exchange is off. We find out later what it is it's the way he smells. At the time, we don't understand it, but she smells another woman's perfume. So Andrea comes home with a Mercedes car and no embrace for her husband because she's tired. He doesn't like how she gets all these perks. Meanwhile, at their construction site, he feels like the workers are being treated poorly. He tells her he wants to talk to Mr. Cartwright about starting his own business and having them, help front some of those costs possibly. And her response to her husband is he doesn't see construction workers. She doesn't like the idea of it at all. You're talking to your husband and saying he doesn't like seeing construction workers. It's like she's demeaning him. Meanwhile, you have her sister who thinks it's a good idea for Ben and Chris to be in business together and a good idea for them to talk to Mr. Cartwright. It's just polar opposites. You see, they don't have the big house, they don't have the money, but they are living comfortably and they do have love. We then see Charlotte arrive at the diner. She got a blue convertible and she takes Alice to choir rehearsal where she clearly has something on her mind. She's watching them singing and everything like that. And Alice comes down and she could tell something's going on with her friend, but her friend kind of brushes it off. She tries to convince Alice to accompany her on a road trip. Now, originally she declines, but we later see that she changes her mind. So before the road trip, we see Charlotte meeting with a woman by the name of Abigail Dexter. She's called Abby or Mrs. Dexter in the movie. She wants to go global, so she's hired Mrs. Dexter to be the new CEO. Keep in mind, she does not know what her son has done. She does this knowing that her son will be upset. Abby is not only a woman, but she is a chocolate woman. William comes in, is told that this is going to be the new chief of operations, and Williams decides to announce that they don't need Abby because he already got them to go global. Abby is surprised because she saw some problems with the deal that they were working on. We later find out that her surprise was warranted because it was not a good move. The deal is front loaded and they cannot get the money until the project is completed. He speaks to Abby like she is a child and tells her not to interrupt when he speaks. She can tell based on this meeting that they're having at their at Cartwright Industries. She can tell that he has an ego on him, but she has knowledge. She says that she did some research and the company needs $25 million so that they don't have, it's $25 million in order to do this project and we don't have it. They say that the only way to raise the money would be if they were to get some of Charlotte's stuff, like 10% of Charlotte's stuff. So Abby, in this meeting in front of other people, Charlotte isn't there, says that I can't advise her to do that, which is what William wants. William wants her to advise her to do it so he can kick his mom from having a controlling vote. He wants to know, as she's telling, I can't advise her to do this. He's like, who do you think you are that you can advise my mother of anything? And Mrs. Dexter said, well, perhaps it's my Yale law degree that would allow me to advise her. Or maybe my master's in finance. Or maybe my 15 years of experience that would qualify me. She says, this agreement that you made in front of everybody is so top heavy that it will bring the company to their knees. He has a problem with her coming into his business, speaking to him like he's some subordinate. By the way he is talking, it's clear that he not only has a problem that she is an outsider telling him what to do, but he has a problem that she is a woman telling him what to do, and probably the fact that she is the complexion that she is as well. You'll see what I mean later on. While all this is going on, Andrea, who is supposed to be the finance person, the guru, suggests for Abby to advise his mom to sell her shares because Mr. Cartwright still will own 3%. So the mother who has 10 is being advised to sell all 10 of hers and let the son keep 3, even though the son is the person who came up with this deal in the first place. If she sells her 10, they will still have the majority because of Mr. Cartwright's vote. Everybody leaves. She tells her she's going to have to think about this, whatever. We see everybody else dismissed. Abby tells some of the board members to meet her in their office. So at this point, it's just Andrea and William, but his wife walks in and Andrea seems bothered. She walks, they have a little basic talk. She kisses her husband on the lips. He leaves because he has something to do before they can head to lunch. And as she's getting ready to walk past her, The wife says to her, "Oh, that's a nice perfume that you're wearing." And she tells her, "Thank you," and she walks off. But she said something about the perfume because she smelled that smell before, obviously on her husband. Now, you could say this is because they work closely together, but that's not the energy that is giving off. So we later see Abby telling Charlotte about the bad deal that William made, and that she did some calling around, checked with some banks, and they basically can't pull out because this company is known to sue. So Abby recommends that Charlotte goes ahead with this the sale of the shares to raise money for the deal. Charlotte lets Abby know that her family has been known to prey on the weak, which is exactly what her son does. He sees a lot of the people that he interacts with as the weak, as pawns on his board. She tells her, go ahead and sell the 10%. Sell the 10%. William, who is there when she's having this conversation, is warned by his mother, Charlotte. If he burns her, she'll nail him to the wall. He then uses his time to tell Abby that they got off to, the wrong foot, and maybe he should take her out to dinner. You see, he thinks, like some of the other people that he works with, that she's going to be his plaything. But she says to him, okay, that'd be fine, as long as my husband can come too. As she walks off smiling, she's on to him. She understands his type. She knows this type of man and what they're accustomed to getting, and she's not going to give it to him. We then have Chris. Chris and Ben want to start the construction firm. Chris tries to get a loan from the bank, which the bank denies. We see them going to the teller to pull out $40. She says, from which account? He was like, we got 2 accounts. And she was like, yes. He goes, well, what's the amount of the account? And she says, $286,043, which he never knew about, a flag. She's supposed to be making $65,000 a year. To having almost $3,000 in her account, that's a big jump. So Chris, we later see, ends up confronting her about the money, and she says that it's not his business. I guess he thought maybe that she was embezzling some money or something like that, but that's not what it was. So she says the money is work bonuses, and she refuses to let him have any of it, which is why she hasn't told him, because he always has this get rich quick scheme or something like that, and she doesn't want him to blow her money. She then tells him he will never be smart like William Cartwright. William Cartwright is smart, and he's charming, and he can carry on a business conversation without stuttering. He went to Harvard. You will never be him or in business for yourself like he got where he got on his own. Understand that even though he went to Harvard, it was very much so because of his father and his mother that he was able to have such a high standing in that business. But as I said before, Andrea likes stuff like that. She's all about that. The status, the look of it all. She tells him, now put my mail in the envelope and put it back in the drawer where you found it. That's how she spoke to her husband. Now, while they're having that discussion, you see Pam and Ben talking about the idea of them having, of Chris and Ben having their own business. And she doesn't like it. Like, she feels like, not Pam. Pam likes it, but she doesn't like that he's so nervous about it. She wants him to just do it. Meanwhile, he's worried about what will happen if they're not successful, because when he came out of the military, he said they had a lot of debt and they're at a place now where they're comfortable, and he worries about what wealth will do to them because he doesn't want to be unhappy like how he sees some of these people who have a significant amount of money are. Example, always wanting more like her sister and like Charlotte and like William do. He then tells Pam about her sister having almost $300,000 in the account. And Pam can't believe that she has that amount of money and she wouldn't be willing to give more money to their mother considering how the business is doing. And she then wonders where she got it from. So she tells him, don't worry about it, I'm going to ask. So it's another day. Nick comes by the diner. Remember, Nick is the person who appears to be homeless. Andrea is there because she's been called there by her sister and to get her child. And she's obviously disgusted by him. As soon as she walks in, she makes a sound and she walks off. He's looking for Alice, but she's not there. Pam lets him know, go in the back, make sure that you wash up and stuff. And he's like, no, I'll just go. And she goes, no, Mom will have a fit if I don't make sure that you're taken care of. So he agrees to clean up and get something to eat. It's trip time. Alice shows up at Charlotte's to surprise her by going on the road trip. We see how excited Charlotte is, as well as them live it up a little. During these scenes, it did break up some of the monotony of the story, and it did kind of drag a little bit, if you ask me. But I did laugh a little bit with some of what was going on. We see Charlotte take Alice to the bars and to the club with the male stripper, and we see Alice take Charlotte to be baptized because she wants her to be born again. And then towards the end of the trip, one night, Alice is woken up by Charlotte, who is fumbling with her camera late at night because it's saying that the memory is full and she's in a confused state. So she tells her, Charlotte does, that the memory card is full and she just wishes that it was simple enough to get a new one. We then find out that Charlotte has been told that she has Alzheimer's and she's seen several physicians and she will eventually lose all her memory. Alice is sad but promises to be there for her and make sure that she remembers. They later return to Atlanta. So Chris comes to the job to apologize about that argument they had about that $200 and however many $1,000, right? He meets some of the co-workers. He meets the receptionist and some other people that don't even realize that Andrea is married. This should be another flag. The receptionist tells him that she'll see if Andrea is there because she usually has a standing appointment on Wednesdays. Andrea comes down the stairs, sees him, and as she's approaching him and he's apologizing, William sees them. Abby and William, who knows exactly who Chris is, approaches. You have William walk out and say, "Is there a problem with the site?" Which you're trying to demean him. You then have him say, "Oh, hey, Mr. Cartwright, I remember meeting you, whatever. And he's introduced to Abby. And Abby says, "Andrea, I didn't know you were married." Part of the reason why they don't know she's married is because she's so busy flirting and doing things with William, and she seems to be ashamed of her husband. Abby then invites him to a gala for the opening of this new building that he knew nothing about. He lets her know that he'll be there and thanks her for the invite. We then see him go meet with Chris, who pushes back his appointment that is also held on Wednesdays, okay, to meet with him. You see the receptionist call Andrea and said, "Your appointment is going to be 15 minutes late. He's running behind schedule," because that stand-in appointment that happens every Wednesday is with Andrea. The same Andrea who in the film earlier tells us, which I didn't talk about this because I'm not going to talk about everything, tells her husband that she can't talk to him about them having a meeting because she doesn't really work a lot with William. But here you are and you're meeting with him every Wednesday. Got it. So he meets with Chris. It's kind of pointless. He's not willing to really help him. As Chris is walking out, he picks up the phone to call his receptionist. And then he says, hold on a second. "Chris, your wife is doing an amazing job." And he winks at him. I had to rewind it to make sure I saw it. He winked at him. Chris is so oblivious that he does not realize that this guy is a snake, and he's sitting here poking fun of you in your face because he gets off on it, and on the phone because he knows that the receptionist knows what's going on. They're at the gala where one of the board members tells William that they'll be glad when he's in charge. They shake hands. He walks off. He tells his wife that the board decided to vote his mom out and him in. Andrea and Chris arrive, and it's a weird exchange as Chris speaks and William walks off. Andrea wants to make sure that Chris does not talk to anyone or embarrass her, and she storms off. She's such a horrible person because he's sitting there looking perplexed. Chris later runs into the receptionist, and he asks her, because his wife has been gone for a long time, if she's seen his wife. The receptionist says no, but maybe she's with William because she's drinking. And her and another lady start laughing at the fact that maybe she's with William as he kind of walks off. Abby overhears this exchange and takes her drink from her and tells her she should go home because she's had too much to drink. She tells her, I'm trying to help you out here. I'm trying to help you keep your job. She says, all I'm doing is a little bit of drinking. This is the receptionist. It's not like I'm upstairs with William, with my husband looking for me. You know what I'm saying? Abby understands what's being implied. And she says, okay, yeah, loud, it's time to go. William and Andrea sneak off and we see them all on each other, and he's telling her that he's going to fire her husband, Chris, for talking to other banks and trying to start his own company. He adds they've been contacting some of our competitors for help. She says, well, he can be persistent, but you firing him gives me more ammunition to leave him. And then for the first time, we see them making out. Jillian, this is our first time seeing them make out, and this is Jillian's first time seeing them make out. I do not know why this thing is so shaky. Anyways, they're making out. Jillian walks in, sees it. They're so into each other, they don't see her, but they do hear heels clacking away, right? They hear the heels, okay? Jillian goes home. Jillian runs past Chris first. Says, have you seen my wife? She says, while she's upset, she's with my husband. He still doesn't get it. Chris still doesn't get it. When she comes down, he's like, what took you so long? She's like, I had to give him some paperwork, whatever. They leave. Jillian's home crying or looking off by the pool. William arrives and says, you left the thing early. You left the party early. And she says, do you love her? And he said, what did you say? And she says, do you love her? And he says, I love you. So she stands up and she says, you won't even answer my question. And he says, I just answered it. And she rips off her necklace and throws it on the ground. It's a new day, and Abby has done some research. So Abby calls Andrea in her office and warns Andrea about their policy and how she can end up being fired. She's concerned because she's noticed several thousands of dollars of purchases, hotel stays every Wednesday, and things on Mr. Cartwright's credit cards that seem to coincide with Andrea's time away from the office, meaning that y'all been doing things together that you're not supposed to do on company funds when you're not supposed to. So she says, are you having an affair with Mr. Cartwright? And Andrea says no. And Abby tells her, I can't protect you if you're gonna lie. And she says, do you think that he will protect you? And she says, I know that he will. And he won't take orders from the likes of you. Andrea really felt like she was better than the women around her just because she was sleeping with this man. We got to call it like we see it. Just because she was sleeping with this wealthy white man who owned this company, she thought that she was better than other people, but she really wasn't. Meanwhile, you have Abby, who is far more qualified and just an overall better human being, who treats people with more respect than Andrea, who is clearly smelling herself. So Abby tells her, it's sisters like you that give us a bad name, screwing your way to the top instead of doing it the right way. Andrea says, the right way is graduating at the top of my class. The right way is getting my master's and helping this company report record profits in 2.5 of the 4 years that I've been here. Affair or not, I'm doing it the right way. So now Lathan was feeling herself in this Andrea role when she said that part. She then says, Abigail, who did you screw to get here? And she tells her, unlike you, I've worked hard to prove that I'm not just as, but I'm better than my counterparts. She said, what you did to get up there won't keep you there. I'm gonna have to let you go. And she said, like, you can't let me go. And she goes, Abby says, he has no authority to keep you here, which is the end of that clip as they go back and forth. Those two did really good off of each other, actually. We then see Chris and Ben show up to the construction site where they find out they're being fired. The foreman gives them their papers via the request of Mr. Cartwright. We then see Chris and Ben at the diner talking to Pam about being fired. And Ben is mad because he's blaming him for all this stuff that he stirred up because he kept talking about getting a new job and trying to do their own thing. When Andrea storms in, we found out that Chris took Andrea's money, that $280 whatever $1,000, to start his new construction business without asking her permission. Andrea is furious, so she's there to confront him, tells him she's tired of supporting the family by herself, that she thought a man was supposed to help a woman. She calls him weak, and she looks at Ben and calls him weak and broke. Ben calls her a trick. Alice walks in while all this is going on. Andrea says, you will never be William Cartwright. Ben says, no one has a desire to be him. Ben then tells Chris, everybody at everyone's talking about, it at the construction site, man. Everyone's talking about what Andrea and William are doing behind your back. So even the people at the construction site know. She says, all that money that you stole from me, it was given to me by William. And he's like, what? Why would he give you that much money? And she's like, because he's my man, Chris. Next thing you know, Chris slaps the mess out of her and she goes flying over the table. Now, I am not condoning violence by any means, but the way she went flying over the table was funny. She tells him that she's having an affair with William and she's going to be with him. She wants Chris to leave. And he's like, after 5 years? You want a divorce from me after 5 years? How is this going to affect our child? And Andrea said, he's a Cartwright. And she says it like, yeah, he's not your kid. He's not your kid. He's William's kid, which means my son is going to have a legacy and he doesn't need you. As she's saying this, you see Chris's eyes filled with tears as he walks out, and his sister saying, I've never seen, not his sister, well, sister-in-law, because it's Andrea's sister. Pam is like, I've never seen him this upset before. So later on, you see her mother with a pack of ice on her face, wanting to know when she started to sleep with William. And she tells her mom she's not talking about it. She's divorcing Chris and she's going to be with William. Pam says, do you really think that that man is going to leave his wife and his child for you? Andrea tells her sister to shut up. He will. Her mother tells her he's not going to be with you. Her response is that she's sure that someone told the woman that took daddy from her mom the same thing. So she basically resents her mother and blames her mom for the reason as to why her dad left. Andrea continues, he left us struggling and broke while he remarried and lived well because of you. We find out this happened 30 years ago. Her sister tells her she's so disrespectful, and her mother is like, I need you to let this go. She says, William is from a different world than you, and he will not marry you. In other words, William does not see you as his equal. Period. That different world, her friend is from a different world too. What is it about William that William doesn't feel like she's worth his time? Because obviously this isn't just a financial thing. There's more to this than that. Okay. She says, you can't make yourself happy, Andrea, bringing misery to other people. And she can see where this is going. Don't do it. She's begging her not to do it. She's like, I can tell this is only going to lead in disaster. And Andrea says she's looking forward to enjoying the ride on the way. Because Andrea thinks she's invincible. We see Chris on the construction site. He goes to confront William about sleeping with his wife, punches him, and almost pushes him out the window, and they're up high in the air. He storms off, flipping tables mad. We then see Jillian. She goes to Charlotte to tell her about being cheated on. She found out that William has been having an affair with Andrea for years in this room 629. So she's telling her, like, look, you have ammo and you have no prenup. You tell him your demands and he will listen. We don't see that conversation. She then tells her to get even, basically, with her husband cheating on her, that William has a secret plan to gain control from the company from her. So we see Andrea in the hotel room in 629 waiting for William. Dora opens. She's like, hey, baby. But instead, Jill arrives to let her know that this whole thing is over, that she was only good enough for a hotel room, that he would never be seen with the likes of her on his arm in front of his colleagues, which goes back to what the mother said about how he wouldn't be with anyone like her because she's not in the same class. But there was a little hint of some racist undertones in that to me. She tells her to stay away from him and the family and walks out. I wonder if she knows that that's supposed to be his child too. So an emergency board meeting is called by Charlotte. William walks in, tells her that she made a bad decision and the board and him have voted to retire her. She finds out that he voted against her. She said, okay, well, who else voted with you? And you see some of them, 2 other people raise their hand. She says, but the Cavalry Company is not here. So the votes from an investor called the Cavalry Company are supposed to be done as well. And they're there. So they're like, they haven't voted for years. She's like, well, they're here now. And they walk in and it is Nick, it is Alice, and it is Pam. So Alice says, Charlotte says, Alice has been investing in the Cartwright firm for many years, slowly accumulating a position of substance based on the advice of Nick. Nick is the guy from the diner. We find out that many years ago, Austin, who was one of the people who just currently voted for Charlotte to be retired, fired Nick because of his ego due to Nick being one of their most powerful stockbrokers. He fired him without a good reason. And just after that, Nick's wife died, and then he lost his kids and he became homeless. By Alice getting advice from him over the years, she was able to build a significant ownership in the stake in the stock in Cartwright Company over all these years. So she has a vote that's even bigger than some of the other people at the table. And she says, Alice, from what I can tell, Charlotte, from what I can tell, you've done a great job and you still remain in control. So you then hear Charlotte say that Miss Dexter will remain as COO, and William, you're fired, because she has enough votes to still control the majority company. And this is how Pam basically finds out that the same woman that she was worried about only making $200 and however many dollars a week is actually a millionaire. She says, Mama, you're a millionaire? Why you didn't tell me? And her mom says, you didn't ask me. Andrea, we can assume, has been fired by Abby because she runs into William in the parking lot and she does not know that he was fired. She thinks William would divorce Jill and marry her and help her take care of her son, despite being told by her mother and his wife that he won't. He says, I'm not leaving my wife. She says, you can't do this, William. You can't do this. Please, we have a son. Please, we have a son. He says, do we? And tells her to turn your car in. And just like that, karma has come to bite her in the butt. To her shock, William tells her the relationship is finished and he leaves her abandoned in the parking lot as she's standing there, and he drives off. Charlotte, who we know has Alzheimer's, later we see her looking at a bunch of reminders of herself and grabbing a bunch of pill bottles. I believe that rather than succumbing to the slow death of Alzheimer's, she decided to just end her life. I hate that she didn't finish. I hate that she didn't fight, but that's what she did. Alice gets the call from Charlotte that she's died and she's hurt. We see them having a funeral, and she says one of the things that she remembered is that after her second child was born, Alice said to her, "Are you living or are you existing?" She says she always made excuses for why she wasn't living. First it was because of this, then it was because her kids needed her, then it was because her grandchild needed her, and now she's just going to live. We then see that we can kind of safely say that Chris probably divorces Andrea. Andrea looks like she's in a tiny apartment with the child of William. Chris and Ben succeed in their new construction business, and I'm assuming that they become wealthy because we see Chris coming to Andrea to give her some money, probably what he took back as an investment, but also because it seems like she doesn't have a job. She tries to hug him. He wants no part of it. He goes over to the son, gives him a kiss on the forehead, leaving Andrea to suffer being the very thing that she didn't want to be, which is poor. She lost a good man because of greed. Nick finally is mentally ready, and he has enough money, of course, because he's been investing too. And he buys a house and he gets off the street. We then see William and his wife are still together having dinner, and Alice sells her diner, goes on another road trip in the blue Cadillac left to her by Charlotte, remembering Charlotte's advice to live fully, not just to only exist. And that is the end. You all, tell me what you thought if you've watched the movie. Put your comments before. How did you feel about Andrea and how things ended for her? What was up with Chris not realizing that his wife was a cheater this whole time? Leave your thoughts down below. Please like the video and please subscribe. And until next time.